First, last night's debate, it was the second one held in the critical primary state of South Carolina. Joining us now is the governor of that state, Mark Sanford. Governor, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
So I know you're supposed to be officially, or would like to be officially, non-aligned in all this, but who won?
Well, that's for you experts to decide.
Well, who would
the people of South Carolina won because it was here, and the people of the country won because we got to see a little bit of a preview where each of the 10 were coming from. How about that?
I think that's good enough. It's interesting to watch people who represent the Republican Party because you get, I think, a sense of where conservatism is. There was a remarkable, I thought, exchange between Ron Paul and Tommy Thompson. I want to play two sound bites next to each other, and I think this says a lot about a lot. Here it is.
We let spending go out of control. We spent money like a drunken sailor, although I never knew a sailor drunk or sober with the imagination of my colleagues. Spending lurched completely out of control. Ronald Reagan used to say we spend money like a drunken sailor. I never knew a sailor drunk or sober with the imagination of the Congress.
Well, that was neither Ron Paul nor Tommy Thompson. That was in fact Senator John McCain using the exact same line in the debate 2 weeks ago and the debate last night. You, of course, endorsed McCain last time. Why aren't his numbers higher, I wonder?
I think, among other things, you got 10 folks in any race, and that's going to pull from everybody's numbers. You certainly have the Giuliani factor at work, and he's pulled a lot of air out of the room. You've got people like Romney or Huckabee who have executive branch experience that are pulling their respective spheres and go down the list from there. So I think the answer is it's relatively early in what is a widely contested race with 10 whole candidates.
You get the impression watching Giuliani do much better than at least I expected in the South as a pretty liberal, at least on social issues, northerner, that national security is the overriding issue to the exclusion of almost everything in the Republican primaries this year. Do you think that's right?
I don't think it is. I think that, in as much as it is, it certainly fuels his candidacy. But I think that when I talk to rank and file Republicans happening in the Middle East. Specifically, they care about the price of health care for the little business that they're trying to run. They care about the theme of immigration. They care about the way that Washington spends in taxes. I mean, this election that took place in November was in part a repudiation of the way that Republicans have acted once they went to Washington on spending. So I think that there are a whole host of other issues.
God, well, speaking of the way they've responded to spending once they got to Washington, I want to attempt again to throw the sound bites I mentioned a minute ago in which Tommy Thompson and Ron Paul were asked the same question. You become president. What's the first thing you'd eliminate from the federal budget? Here are their responses.
Well, the first one I would eliminate is a program in the Department of Health and Human Services in CDC that deals with the stockpile.
I'd start with the departments. Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security.
That's just very telling as far as I'm concerned. Tommy Thompson, conservative, smart. The first program he'd eliminate is something I've never heard of, and I live here and cover this stuff. It's so micro, it doesn't even register. It takes Ron Paul, this far-out libertarian with no chance of being elected to anything other than a House seat, to say what Republicans used to say in 1994. I'd eliminate whole departments. Has that whole rhetoric, is that just gone forever?
I don't know that it's gone forever. It's certainly been gone for a while, and again, that's part of the problem of the Republican brand right now. I think that the Reagan coalition was in part formed because of real clarity of where Republicans stood on taxes and spending, and at that time the war against communism. I think that if you murkiness as to what the Republican brand or vision is all about, as was articulated just a moment ago in the two sound bites that you cut. And so I think that what Ron Paul was getting at, and I think this is one of the values of having lesser-known candidates in a race, it causes some conversations to take place that otherwise wouldn't take place. What he is indeed reminding folks of is those were the things we talked about back in 1994 when a bunch of us went off to Congress. And I think that there is a thirst with a lot of the rank-and-file voter out there for a little bit more in the way of conversation on that front.
Boy, when Ron Paul said that last night, it really was like opening up a time capsule. I mean, you could just smell the mustiness of that rhetoric. I mean, it turns me on still, but most people could care less, apparently. What happened exactly? I know this is the subject of many books, and not, we don't have enough time to really explain it, but just tell me quickly. You went in 1994 to Congress. Why has that passion for cutting government disappeared?
We got trapped in the world of governance. I remember as a freshman when leadership would come to you and say, look, I know you talked about this, that, and whatever in the campaign trail, but we got to govern now. At that point, it was cover the wallet, run for the hills, because we knew whatever was coming next inevitably meant more in the way of claims on every one of the taxpayers that we represented. And so I think there's a temptation in any party when you've been in control to get away from some of the core values that brought you into control and to get mired down into the blocking and tackling, the trading back and forth that I think a lot of people are weary of. And I do think that when you look at David Walker, who's the Comptroller General of the United States of America right now, going on what he calls his fiscal wake-up tour, reminding Americans of the fact that we're on a clearly unsustainable track with regard to spending, that in fact you've got people both in Washington and people at the grassroots level reminding elected folks of, hey, this is something we'd like to hear a little bit more of.
Boy, it is nice to hear that. I wish people had been reminding him more for the last 10 years. I think they'd be in better shape right now, the Republican Party, I would think. Governor, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Good to hear your voice again.
Thanks.